Hello and welcome to GreenFleet Talks. My name is Kate Armitage and I'm your host for our discussion today. And I'm delighted to be joined by Grant Robson, who is Global Business Director from Michelin Connected Fleet.
Thanks,
Grant,
Kate. It's
lovely
a pleasure
to meet
be
you.
here.
Great,
Lovely
good.
to meet you.
Okay, so today we're going to be discussing the transition to electric fleets, barriers to adoption and the role that the government must play. But before we dive into that topic, Grant, can you tell me a little bit more about Michelin Connected Fleet and the work that they are doing to support fleet decarbonisation?
Absolutely, Kate. So obviously, the Michelin Group overall has a few core values: people, profit, and planet. Okay, which is obviously becoming more and more salient in our current environment. Michelin Connected Fleet is part of the Michelin Group. What we do is we work with fleets globally to improve their performance by providing connected fleet services and solutions. Okay, so across multiple continents, 600,000 connected vehicles. We give customers data and, most importantly, insights on how they can improve the profitability and increasingly the sustainability of their day-to-day fleet operations. Now, obviously, the topic of electrification and alternative fuel vehicles is a huge one with our customers today. And I would say that there's a few levels at which we work with our customers to support their decarbonization journey. I think for customers that are earlier in their journey, starting to think about, okay, what does decarbonization or electrification look like for my business operation? We offer insights and advisory services to help customers figure out whether it's 50 vehicles or 5,000 vehicles, what is the right transition path for turning your fleet from ICE to whether that's EV, hydrogen, et cetera, as well as starting to think through the infrastructure that they'll need to in order to achieve that. And then I think increasingly we're obviously seeing customers as well that have already started their journey and are looking to accelerate it or are looking to optimize performance of their alternative fuel vehicles in the same way they have traditionally on ICE vehicles. That's where, through our connected telematics devices and the fleet management services we provide, we're able to give different personas in customer fleet operations, whether that's a day-to-day dispatcher, whether that's a transport director, the same level of insight they need to optimize performance irrespective of vehicle type, right? So that could be knowing real-time charge status on the vehicle so you can dispatch jobs effectively, knowing the effective range of a vehicle at any given time, right, to plan jobs throughout the day, throughout the week. So it's really all comes back to managing and optimizing performance of the fleet, regardless of the vehicle type, to remove the barriers for our customers to decarbonize their operation.
Great, thank you, Grant. A lot of that I wasn't aware of, I have to be honest. But I think from what you've said, you're in a great position to advise people on what their electrification strategy might be based on the data that you're already holding on that fleet.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think we're in a we have a privileged position with our customers in that one of the enablers for providing the fleet management solutions and services we do is connecting to the vehicles. Right, so we're able to through telematics hardware. So we're able to understand consumption on the vehicles, location, the journeys they're taking week to week. And I think when we look at electrification, what are the barriers, the opportunities, the challenges that customers need to overcome, fleet operators need to overcome? It's frequently about, I guess, personalizing the EV transition strategy to their unique operation, to their unique journeys and jobs to be done on a day in, day out, weekly basis. And so based on the data that we capture from customers' fleets, we're really able to work with them to turn that into insight and action plans for, how can you uniquely start to convert your fleet to electric.
And that is so important because every single fleet, almost without exception that I speak to, says, oh, well, I can see how it would work for that fleet, but it won't work for my fleet because of this and because of this. And that level of personalization as well, when you talk about averages, average daily mileages or typical ranges of the vehicles, doesn't take into account the duty cycle and payload for that particular business, doesn't take into account those odd long journeys that have to be made, so that it all starts to come together. Grant, are you working with fleets at the moment where you're saying actually transitioning to electric at the moment is going to be difficult for you, and why?
What we see most often now with the fleets we're working with on electrification and decarbonization is it's not a black and white answer, right? And often what we see is that, particularly for it varies across fleet size, but particularly for larger fleets, which obviously face a more complex challenge, logistically and operationally, to decarbonize across many hundreds or thousands of vehicles. We often the way we analyze our customers' data and approach it is often trying to help them figure out where they can start, right? Which I think, as I say, it's not always a black and white. It is for you, it isn't for you. I think when we look at customers' operations and we look at across the range of vehicles you have, the different types of journeys or jobs that those vehicles are doing day in, day out, or week in, week out, usually what we see is on any given fleet, there is a candidate set of vehicles, a proportion of the fleet could be 10, 50, 90%, depending on where the fleet operates, and the distribution of regions that could be good candidates to start, right? So for instance, we work with some field service businesses that may have depots or regions that are more urban, right, where charge point coverage is quite good. Journeys are usually quite short, going from point to point on buildings that are close together. Could be good candidates to start. They may conversely have depots in rural regions where vehicles could be going upwards of 100, 150 miles per day, which obviously wouldn't be good candidates. So what we usually help customers do is look at that distribution of, based on your exact operation, what does that distribution of journeys and jobs to be done look like? Who would be the right candidates to start, and operate productively on an EV in the same way with an ICE, to avoid intraday charging and that type of thing. And obviously, as the national charging network hopefully continues to accelerate, as it has been, we hope to see the proportion of electrification candidates on fleets improve and improve. But as I say, it's really a challenge of figuring out where to start and where to prioritize.
And encouraging fleets to focus on what can be done today rather than worrying about what can't be done, which seems quite a common theme. So you mentioned there the public charging network. From a fleet point of view, my experience is that workplace or home charging are the two, or depot charging are the most common, but there is still a dependency on the public charging network. There is, if you read the papers or if you go to some EV owners forums online, quite a few people saying that the public charging network is not keeping pace with the amount of electric vehicles on the road. What's your experience of this? What have you found?
Well, I think it varies. And obviously, the pace of growth in the public network has been fairly substantial. But I also acknowledge that relative to kind of 2030 target, I think 300,000 stations or so, there is quite a ways to go, right? So we basically need to see continued acceleration on infrastructure to achieve that target between now and 2030. So I think there, to some extent, those concerns are valid. And as I mentioned, I think different customers are going to, depending on how they have decided to start electrification or are thinking about it, and depending on their unique operation, the distances to be traveled, locations and regional coverage of charging infrastructure, some may feel the pain more than others. Okay. And I think part of that comes back to, from the outset, taking a more kind of data-driven approach to electrification, so you avoid ending up in a situation where vehicles are frequently over range, needing to charge intraday, et cetera. So I think some of it is due diligence up front to avoid getting yourself into a situation where you're feeling the pain on lack of charging infrastructure. And I think another thing that we also see with a lot of our customers is that contributes to the operational challenge of charging is having the right level of visibility. right? So whether I'm a dispatcher at the depot, whether I'm a driver in the field, being able to have visibility on where charge points are, which is, kind of foundational at a basic level, but is still a challenge in some cases. And I think even more importantly, having visibility within those charge points, what is the availability? So which charge points are in use, which charge points are not in use, and what is the type of charger, right? Is it a slow charger, rapid, et cetera? And I think between those two topics of the network infrastructure itself, which absolutely, I think there's been good progress made and more to be done. But I think the visibility for sort of a day in, day out dispatcher, fleet manager, or driver, that is, in my opinion, equally important. And it's where a lot of our customers are challenged and also get value from our solutions, at least, to be able to see, okay, if there's 5 jobs to be done, we can see the charge level, we can see the availability of which chargers on the route, we can filter those to see which are rapid chargers. It's, again, it's not a replacement to improving the infrastructure itself, but it does help you be a bit more planful as a fleet manager in terms of, making sure that the productivity of your operation doesn't get compromised by your sustainability objectives.
And Grant, so I mean, I love what you're saying. It sounds fantastic. Do you find, so then when you're routing and scheduling for a day's work, you then would say this is going to need a charge during the day, and we've recommended a stop here where we know that there are rapid chargers available. Is it also real time in terms of availability, or is that something that you're aspiring towards?
We do strive to have it as accurate as possible. In our case, we do use a third-party provider to basically pull data on the status of chargers, the type of chargers that are in the field, and also their status, if they're in use or not in use. So obviously, depending on the latency of data, things may not be perfectly up to date. We do strive to keep it as real time as possible, just because for a dispatching use case, you really need, current actionable insight. Yes, so we do strive to keep it as up to date as possible.
Brilliant. And of course, I'm not entirely sure when, but we do have this new legislation going through, which is about the consumer experience, which will improve the availability of data, real-time data, and also, of course, hopefully will improve the uptime so that we get less charge points that are not operational, which of course is the other problem.
Yeah,
Great.
Of course.
So we've talked about the public charging network, but when you're talking to your clients, then what are the most common barriers that you come across, and how can they be addressed?
So I think there's a few barriers that we've seen as pretty salient themes across fleets seeking to electrify. The first one, which is one we've obviously talked on, is productivity and range anxiety, right? So as a fleet manager, obviously, performance and profitability of the fleet is paramount, right? And shouldn't be a conflicting objective with sustainability. And that's our ambition for our customers. And quite simply, they need to know, with the jobs that we do day to day, are we able to do those at the same level of performance, reliability, productivity as with an EV as we do with an ICE today, right? And I think that's where it really comes down to being able to figure out what are those candidate vehicles that are typically within range of the EV models that we're considering, right? To avoid a scenario where you're having to stop a vehicle for 30 minutes, 60 minutes intraday to charge, whereas today, obviously, refueling an ICE vehicle is much faster. So I think one of the themes is certainly around productivity and range anxiety, where being able to identify those vehicles with the mileage and journeys and range that's suitable for an EV now, I think can help mitigate that. A second one that we see is around charging strategy and accessibility, where this is something that, again, having access to historical journey information of your vehicles can help a lot, because, and it also does depend on your operation, but we see customers really need to be thoughtful to analyze the journeys across different types of vehicles to see which vehicles, maybe for all or part or most of my fleet, using the public network is feasible, based on the locations where we're traveling. Conversely, maybe they need to look at actually installing home chargers with drivers, or they need to consider depot chargers. I think that's really where it depends on the traditional journeys or the typical journeys that their vehicles are taking, where they're staying at the end of the day, in order to basically have an effective charge point plan. Because otherwise we see that as a pretty significant challenge to customers' performance and productivity day to day. And I would say the last theme we see, which is quite critical, is driver management, driver onboarding and change management with moving to EVs. The fact is, moving to EVs is, while it can sometimes be kind of a unilateral decision based on sustainability targets for a business, doing it successfully needs commitment and engagement from all the roles in a business operation, and drivers are obviously sort of a critical stakeholder in making that happen. And this is where we work with our customers to really make sure we have a clear plan for how they manage and onboard drivers and give them the insights and data they need to support that, right? So that could be anything ranging from, in the past, you may have managed fuel card reimbursement. What does that look and feel like operationally with EV charge reimbursements, right? Where are you going to get the charging data from? How are you going to compare and audit it relative to the journeys of the vehicle, right? We're having some of that sort of ground truth data, helps our customers mitigate, charge fraud and that type of thing. There's other considerations around driver performance and safety scorecards, where we know that, if you've driven an EV, the responsiveness of an EV is quite different than an ICE vehicle. And so, as an example, one of the core KPIs a lot of our customers follow as driver safety scorecard is harsh driving events, harsh acceleration, harsh braking, where very often we see new EV drivers might be a little more susceptible to harsh acceleration based on responsiveness of the vehicle. So there is a bit of, again, having access to the data is paramount, and also understanding kind of best practice to be able to onboard drivers effectively is quite a critical one to EVs, because they really are obviously, the one of the critical stakeholders to make it successful.
Buy-in and engagement throughout the business is probably the single biggest barrier for businesses that are really struggling to do this, because we're solving so many of the problems now, but the human problems are a little bit harder to solve. And Grant, I love your example of you put a driver into an electric van, and suddenly you might see that their acceleration, which of course, because they are a joy to drive, and it's got great acceleration, which is brilliant. Of course, when they find that they have to stop 3/4 of the way through the day for half an hour and don't get paid overtime for it, they may be a little bit more conservative about their acceleration pedal. But
well, that last point is just to circle back on it, is a really good one, actually, because on the topic of sort of driver management and onboarding, we also see kind of the concept of good driver performance and behavior evolving as EVs get introduced, because there's new behaviors that before may have been completely irrelevant, but now with an EV have a real business impact. So for instance, how efficiently is the driver charging the vehicle, right? Where we, based on the insight we're able to get from charging status of the vehicle, we're able to see, are drivers consistently charging multiple times a day, or are they charging consistently when the battery is over 60%, as an example, which we know, more charge cycles contribute to wear down on the battery, and obviously higher maintenance costs in the long term for the fleet. Whereas before, you fuel the vehicle 5 times, you fuel it once, who cares, right? So it's interesting that, as you say, obviously the change management, the human problems, as you put it, is so critical, and having the right data and obviously the right onboarding metrics and performance KPIs. It's an evolving landscape, I would say.
It definitely is. And if we're talking about an evolving landscape, I just wanted to discuss one last thing with you, Grant. It's been a difficult week or 10 days here in the UK, as rumours have abounded that government are going to dial back on their 2030 their petrol ban target. What's your take on that? And what more should government be doing?
Yeah, it's a controversial one and a challenging one. I acknowledge that. And our view is that government intervention is absolutely needed and critical to incentivize this transition, because it really is a sea change, right? And and there's multiple parties in play, considering, as we were talking on charging infrastructure, where the term and time scale of investments is quite long lead, right? So I think for the government to be able to send the right signals in terms of EV manufacturing expectations, it sets the right tone for charging infrastructure investment as well, and we get towards more of a virtuous cycle. And I think for our customers, especially with charging availability and accessibility being such a critical theme, we really see this virtuous cycle between encouraging improvement on the manufacturing side, which then gives more latitude and business case for infrastructure investment, is something that, and then obviously that is then beneficial and available to fleet operators. It really is, we believe it's quite important for making the transition effective, successful, and also rapid, right? For the UK.
Yeah. Grant, I completely agree with you. And actually, the electrification of transport has been a big success in this country to date. And I think fleets really have embraced this change and have worked really hard to transition their fleets. And similarly, we've seen billions of pounds worth of private investment in this transition. So, it would be heartbreaking if we were to get, a flip-flop decision from the government that would really damage the confidence, I think, of the fleets who are making these investments. It's difficult times, but let's hope that we hear something slightly more positive in the coming days from government.
Yeah.
Grant, it has been a pleasure talking to you today. Thank you very much for your insight. That is about all we've got time for. So I would like to say thank you to Michelin for joining GreenFleet Talks.
Thanks, Kate. It's been a pleasure.
Great. And of course, thank you for watching. Please tune in to GF365 again soon.